A lot of people don't realize that the world could be quite different if we lived under double gravity. It would be a challenge to walk and even breathe. Plus, rain and sports would feel much more intense. But it wouldn't just affect us. Our planet's nature would also change in many ways. You can find out about some of them by watching this video. And for more interesting facts about our world, subscribe to the channel. What if we lived under double gravity? Skyscrapers would become much more accessible. Buildings over 30 floors high are not so common because they require expensive maintenance, engineering solutions, and strict safety measures. The higher the floor, the greater the risk of lives being lost in case of an emergency exit via the stairs. A fire in such a building would quickly turn into a horror movie. In addition, people living in skyscrapers spend a lot of time waiting for elevators. But all these problems would disappear if we were under double gravity. It's simple. People would simply prefer living on lower floors in buildings with fewer amenities. But there's no need to worry about their fate. After all, scientists believe that if the force of gravity increased 2 times, the buildings would also get stronger. So the houses would withstand double the load. But wait, it's not all good news. You won't be able to walk like a normal person. Do you know how to run fast or make a long jump? Well, forget all your achievements. If the force of gravity suddenly doubled, you would no longer be able to move like before. Now, to take a step, you'll need to exert twice as much effort to overcome the force pulling you down. That is, you'd have to lift your feet much higher. A running speed of 45 kilometers per hour, which seems quite fast, would now require the same effort as moving at 9 kilometers per hour. By the way, there's a similar situation on Mercury, which is closest to the Sun. The planet's gravity is 3 times that of Earth, which means local residents would have to jump up really high to reach the same height they could on Earth. Or maybe they don't jump at all. Your muscles will grow. Bodybuilders probably won't like what's happening next. With the doubling of the force of gravity, everyone on Earth would instantly become incredibly muscular. That's because muscle mass would increase proportionally to the weight. Muscles would become larger and denser due to the load from the increased gravity. Of course, not only the body, but the whole metabolism would change. On Earth, we don't even realize how much energy our bodies waste just overcoming gravity. If we lived under double gravity, our bones and muscles would adapt to these conditions. That is, they would get stronger and more massive. But over time, our heart would find it difficult to pump blood through the body, and breathing would also become more difficult. That's why you shouldn't wish for this to happen. Rain will hurt. Do you love walking in the rain? Most likely after this phenomenon, you'll never want to do it again. Raindrops are like small meteorites falling from the sky. They can be dangerous if you live on a planet with double gravity. The fact is that raindrops accelerate faster when falling. If the acceleration due to gravity is twice as strong, the raindrops will hit the ground at twice as high a speed. It's easy to calculate that the kinetic energy of a falling drop will increase 4 times. So a regular summer rain on Earth will turn into a real disaster. By the way, this problem is familiar to the inhabitants of Venus. There, the raindrops fall almost twice as fast as on Earth, although the acceleration due to gravity there is only 9 meters per second squared, while on Earth, it's almost 10 meters per second squared. But the pressure of the atmosphere on Venus is much higher than on Earth. This creates a very dense and hot lower layer of the atmosphere, so the raindrops on Venus evaporate before they reach the surface. As for Earth, let's hope it doesn't come to such an extreme. Birds will soar to incredible heights. Many birds can fly up to several kilometers above the ground. For example, condors often fly over the Grand Canyon at an altitude of about 6 kilometers. But even this achievement will seem insignificant compared to the possibilities of birds on a planet with double gravity. First, the birds would have to spend much more energy to gain altitude. But if they managed to do this, they'd be able to see what's around them much better. The thing is that air density decreases with altitude. Thus, the resistance for birds will decrease, allowing them to fly faster and further. In addition, birds soaring high above the ground are protected from most predators. In short, if humans had the opportunity to fly, they would certainly choose to be at a great height. Sports will become more intense. Fans of contact sports such as boxing and mixed martial arts should be wary. When the force of gravity doubles, punches and kicks will hurt much more. Moreover, athletes will feel much heavier, which means they'll move slower. Some sports require great speed, such as Formula One racing or tennis. The ability to move quickly is also important in everyday life. Fortunately or unfortunately, everything would change if we lived under double gravity. And who knows, perhaps one day someone will invent a new sport that will be based on the laws of physics of a planet with double gravity. It's hard to imagine what kind of activity it might be, but perhaps a description of it may be found in the works of science fiction writers. For example, there's a book called The Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg. It describes a future where Earth is heavily polluted and most people live in giant cities. Those who can't afford housing there move to other planets. One of the characters of the novel moves to a planet with double gravity. According to the author, the locals had to bend their knees all the time as if they were praying. Your car will drive worse. Do you own a car? Take good care of it. If the force of gravity increases, the engine will have to work much harder to move the vehicle, meaning it'll quickly break down. So it's best to sell your car right now and buy a bike. But not all vehicles will have problems. Aircraft, for example, won't experience any difficulties. Their engines are designed to overcome gravity, and the increased load won't bother them at all. But it's not only the cars that will suffer. All animals that can fly will have trouble. And this includes insects, birds, and bats. They'll need to flap their wings much more often to stay in the air. By the way, the first bats probably evolved precisely because 70 million years ago, the force of gravity was lower than it is now. Back then, the animals could easily jump into the air and glide through it. Over time, they got used to low gravity, and when the force of gravity increased, only those individuals that were able to flap their palms could save themselves from falling to the ground. So the bats became the ancestors of modern species. Who knows, maybe one day the force of gravity will increase again, and then the mammals will have to learn to fly all over again. Your house will be different. Do you like your home? It's very likely that you'll hate it if the force of gravity increases. First of all, the windows will be too small. Houses are built in such a way that the windows take up no more than 20% of the wall area. This is necessary to prevent too much heat from entering the room during the day. If the force of gravity increases, the windows will need to be made much smaller to keep the rooms cool. Also, the walls will have to be reinforced to withstand heavy furniture and appliances. Finally, it'll be difficult to escape from your home in case of danger. In short, it's better to think in advance where you'd like to live if the force of gravity doubles. People will shrink. Are you proud of your height? Don't be. If the force of gravity doubles, no one will pay attention to you unless you're over 2 meters tall. That's because the human body consists of various elements, including oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. These elements form molecules that create a certain structure. If the force of gravity doubles, the molecules will pull each other more tightly and the person will literally shrink. Scientists at the University of Cambridge have calculated that if the force of gravity was half as strong, a person would become about 2 centimeters taller. Therefore, under double gravity, people would become 4 centimeters shorter. The weather will change. Do you live in a place where it rains often? If yes, get ready for floods. If the force of gravity doubles, the water vapor in the clouds will condense faster, resulting in much heavier rain. In addition, the temperature will drop significantly since the amount of heat in the atmosphere will decrease. But the change in temperature will depend on the location. For example, the poles will become colder and the equator will become warmer. Hurricanes, typhoons, and other cyclones will become more powerful and frequent. The thing is that in such weather phenomena, warm water evaporates and rises with a decrease in pressure. In other words, the lower the pressure, the higher the temperature and vice versa. If the force of gravity doubles, the pressure will increase, so the air will cool. This means that the rising air will cool faster, forming clouds and precipitation. Goodbye, satellites. Have you ever wondered who's protecting our planet from space debris? In fact, it's the satellites in orbit. They constantly rotate and fall to Earth along with pieces of debris. Satellites are usually sent into low or medium Earth orbit, approximately 2,000 kilometers from the surface. However, they don't simply hang in the air. They're constantly falling, but their speed allows them to cover a large enough distance in a short period of time. In short, satellites are constantly falling to Earth, and if the force of gravity becomes twice as strong, these objects will simply fall onto our heads. But even without that, they sometimes fall down unexpectedly. For example, in 1978, a Soviet satellite fell on a residential building in the city of Arlen, Bania. Fortunately, no one was injured, although the pieces of the satellite were scattered over a vast area. By the way, after the incident, the Soviet government paid the residents of the city considerable compensation. But it's unlikely they were happy about this unexpected wealth. After all, they became famous throughout the country because of the fallen satellite.